Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this webinar, so if you are interested in sharing it with friends and colleagues, we will be posting it to reformcalifornia.org in the next 24 hours so that you can share this information with them. And it's very important that we spread the word because time is running out to decide whether we're pursuing the California Voter ID Initiative for 2024 or whether we're going to have to delay it and reset for 2026. We will be taking questions and comments at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, you can certainly raise your hand using the Zoom software. If you're on a cell phone or a phone, you can hit *9. And of course, you can always type your questions into the chat box. I will be answering those as we go through as well. So we are pursuing a two-track process at Reform California for election integrity. One is an initiative to require voter ID along with several other important reforms. That will clean up our elections. It will restore public trust and confidence, and we'll be talking about that initiative in just a moment. But we also are looking at improved signature reviews in county election offices. This is sort of like poll watching, but it's much different. And I don't consider poll watching to be very effective, frankly. If you want to do it, do it. But really what we need to do is get more trusted people hired in each county election office to do the work of opening the envelopes, comparing the signatures, and raising any concerns. We've already shown that that works in several pilot projects in different counties, and we want to continue that irrespective of what our timetable is for the voter ID initiative. All the information that we're going to talk about today, by the way, will be online at reformcalifornia.org or go directly to the campaign site, electionintegrityinitiative.com. With that, let's get started. Again, as I mentioned, we've done a lot of analysis and research on the problems associated with California's elections. And let me just summarize it by saying no state in the country, no nation on this planet should be doing elections the way California does elections. It is filled with problems, weak internal controls. It is ripe for fraud. And it results in no public trust and confidence. And you cannot have a healthy democracy if you have a massive percentage of people each election not have confidence that the outcome of the election is true, reflects the will of the voters. I would really encourage you, if you are doubtful about the problems that we're trying to solve, I really encourage you to check out the full report of the Transparency Foundation from June of 2023 of this year. It says audit reveals evidence of voter fraud in California's 2022 election. And you can get that full report. And I encourage you to read it. Any of your friends that say election integrity is a conspiracy theory, get them this report. It's free at electionintegrityca.com, electionintegrityca.com. But this Transparency Foundation report was 18 months long in terms of the investigation, and it looked at every single angle, every issue of California's elections, including the issues of ballot harvesting and poor maintenance of voter lists, as well as problematic signature reviews. So it does a complete forensic examination of California's elections, and the results, the conclusions are damning. It shows that California's elections cannot be trusted, period, full stop. And no one in the media wants to respond to this report. No politician wants to talk about the report because they know they really can't refute it because it is absolutely documented step by step. Next slide. One of the main issues that came up in this report that is alarming is that there is absolute evidence of voter fraud in California. And we know that the way in which our elections have been weakened in California is, number one, the Democrats in charge have prohibited counties from updating their voter rolls. And the state's process for sharing data and information about voters who've moved out of the state. And we all know people are fleeing California in record numbers, millions in just the last few years. The state does not actually take those people off the voter lists. And so we have voter lists that are contaminated, they're out of date, they're not reliable. So the first fault that the Transparency Foundation found was that the voter lists are not being properly maintained. The second issue that they find is that we are now mailing out a ballot to everyone. And this is all part of the COVID-19 scam that somehow, people can't vote unless they do it by mail. Just absolute absurdity. They use COVID to basically get all mail-in ballot elections. Who are we mailing the ballots to? We're mailing it to an outdated list. So that cuts the chain of custody on ballots and results in orphan ballots. About 9.8% of California homes received an erroneous ballot, an orphan ballot, mainly because they received ballots for people that no longer lived at that address or that they don't even know who the hell they are. Third, the Democrats legalized ballot harvesting. Once again, breaking the chain of custody. And we know that there are a number of left-wing political groups that harvest ballots using taxpayer money. They don't even need George Soros or Zuckerberg to give money through foundations. They're getting it from the state of California, millions of dollars for ballot harvesting. And where do they go? They go into traditionally Democrat neighborhoods and communities to harvest the ballots. So it is a weaponization of our tax money in elections to unduly influence the turnout of elections. And the media doesn't want to report on that, but the Transparency Foundation documents all of that. Then we know that signature reviews are wildly off. The Secretary of State's guidance forces counties to accept signatures that are clearly not legitimate. But one of the things that the Transparency Foundation shows in this report is a huge disparity between counties on the percentage of signatures rejected for not matching. And when you have that disparity, what it shows is that there's lack of common guidance or lack of clear guidance or a misapplication of the guidance, unequal administration of elections. So one county, a signature will be rejected. In another county, it will be accepted. And so the report shows that. Finally, the report found absolute evidence of fraud, where they went out and looked at signatures that were rejected but not cured by the voter. The team then went out and tracked down those people, or at least tried to. And the vast majority of people did not respond. But of the people who were interviewed, 14.717% said, I did not vote. This was fraud. Someone else voted for me. That's not my signature. I did not vote. And this sample size is statistically relevant in terms of rejected ballots for bad signatures that did not get cured by the voter. Cured means fixed or claimed. 14.17, and that's the floor because a lot of people did not respond to the investigators. We couldn't track them down. So 14.17% is actually the floor of fraud, not the ceiling. So clearly we have a problem here. And that's where our California Voter ID initiative comes in, to try to fix these problems in a common sense way without being partisan about it. Next slide. So what we're trying to do first and foremost is force the Secretary of State and county voter offices to do a better job of verifying citizenship status of people registering to vote. Motor Voter does not do that. Our initiative would require that we address that. Second, outdated voter lists that are not being updated and the mail-in ballots being mailed out using outdated lists. We've got to fix that. And that relates to the third, the orphan ballots being actually mailed out is a problem, eliminating chain of custody. Next slide. We also know that there is disparity on the funding of ballot harvesting with taxpayer money going there, failure to check signatures, as I mentioned earlier. And we really don't do post-election audits in California. They do a risk limiting audit, but that barely scratches the surface of issues that people want to see addressed. So our initiative has to struggle with these 6 areas to find out how can we fix them. And there are some things that we have to juggle, though. Next slide. The issues that we want to juggle is, first, what are Californians willing to support? And unlike the media and the politicians, the voters actually are concerned about fraud. The Berkeley IGS poll from November 2022 showed that we have 60% of voters who think that people voting or casting ballots illegally in elections is either a major or minor threat, of which 45% of those are Democrats and 90% of Republicans and 59% of independents. So we have a super majority of people worried about voter fraud, concerned about it. We have a plurality of Democrats. We've got a sizable majority of independents and Republicans. And so when people say that this is just about Republicans and conspiracy theories, that's not true. It's about Californians having this concern. But next slide shows that we have to balance our approaches because we don't want to make it harder to vote. We want to make it as easy as possible for legal voters to cast legal ballots. And so there is, in that same poll, a concern about, is it a major or minor threat to have organized efforts making it harder for Americans to vote? Again, Berkeley IGS is a California poll. So this is only California voters. We're not mixing it in with other jurisdictions. And there you've got 78% of voters worried about suppression of votes or making it harder to vote, including 52% of Republicans and 77% of independents. So we have to balance these issues. Next. As we put together our initiative, we also looked at voter ID, and we know that there is vast support for voter ID. Rasmussen says 67% of voters support voter ID. And now we see that 89% of Republicans, 60% of Democrats, and 77% of independents support voter ID. When you look at the crosstabs of that poll, Blacks, African Americans, Latinos, all demographics support voter ID. The only demographic we found that don't support voter ID, Democrat politicians and their friends in the liberal media. Go figure. And I say that with dripping sarcasm because these people are literally fundamentally dishonest people when it comes to this issue. Next slide. What we're balancing. Number one is we want to fix the problems. So what are the biggest problems and what are the best reforms to address them? And note that we cannot do everything at once. We have to focus on the biggest problems and what reforms would be the biggest impact on those problems. So there will be some things that you all will say, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? It has to deal with priority. It also has to do with legality. We want to make sure that our initiative is airtight when it comes to legal challenges, because you know damn well that the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, will try to undermine the will of the voters with some absurd legal challenge. We know we're going to get challenged by Bonta. He's actually a very bad lawyer. The good news there is that he's incompetent. He's viciously partisan. And but we don't want to give him any ammo. I know I'm triggering him. Oops, sorry, it happened again. He doesn't like the Second Amendment. We don't want to give him any cause. We want to make sure that our initiative is absolutely compliant with all voting laws, which is our second element there. The Help America Vote Act and the National Voter Registration Act have specific federal requirements that we must make sure we harmonize to. Third is, what will the public support? We will not move beyond where the public support is because we already know our ballot title is going to be unfair. We already know that the Democrats and the liberal media hate this initiative and they're going to lie about it. So the initiative itself has to be so popular and so commonsensical that the voters will simply say, oh, I know what this is and I actually support it. And finally, what we're going to talk about today is campaign bandwidth. I'm not going to ask a volunteer or a contributor to help unless we are ready to pull the trigger and move forward with a signature drive. And so there's a lot of things that we need to do between now and November 18th, when I have to make a very difficult decision of go, no go for the 2024 election. But there's also things we need to do if we do delay it to next year, and there's a window I want to talk to you about. We have to be ready. And that means that, pushing it back a few months doesn't mean, oh, let's take a break. We have got to keep plowing forward. But I want to make sure that our timeline is successful. I want volunteers to know that we would never ask them to do something unless the timeline is set and achievable. So here's what we're wrestling with in terms of the go, no go decision on November 18th. Next slide. Well, before I get that, here's what we require in our initiative. I filed the initiative originally back in 2021 in September. We were able to get some intel that the Attorney General was going to try to do certain legal things to stop us. We redoubled our efforts and redrafted the initiative from 2021 the fall through 2023 the summer. Met with a lot of experts on this issue, and submitted a revised initiative in August of 2023, a few months ago. That then resulted in title and summary, which we received on October 19th. But what our initiative requires is, number one, state and local government officials will now be held accountable in the Constitution of the state of California for doing their job of maintaining accurate voter lists and doing the requisite checks on eligibility. That was not something that's in our Constitution. Surprise, surprise. We give standing for individual taxpayers to sue to enforce all provisions. So this is important. We want them to do their job properly. Second, we require voter ID. In person would be a driver's license or government ID that you show, or vote by mail would be a driver's license, the last digits of the license. Now, you might say, well, illegal immigrants get driver's licenses. Yes, but take a look at requirement number one. It says that you cannot be registered to vote unless you have been verified. And also illegal immigrants getting licenses, we would expect and demand and sue if it doesn't happen. We would expect that any illegal immigrant would have a flag on the number that's used, so that that person cannot use that driver's license to verify identity for voting by mail. Some people say, well, what if I don't want to have a license? What if I'm old and I don't drive a car anymore? Look, 28 states have voter ID, and many of those states provide a voter ID card if someone requests it. So the DMV can certainly provide non-vehicle license identification to people if they so request it. Third, we require that the polling locations be monitored for the wait time, because we're concerned about the Democrats cutting back on the number of polling stations on election day. And the Democrat media, the media doesn't want to report this, but the reality is conservative older voters like to vote on election day. And the Democrats are trying to suppress the vote illegally, shamefully, by cutting back on the number of polling stations. San Diego County had 80% of their polling stations reduced in the last election. It is vital that we flag this, monitor it, make it transparent. So the wait time calculations are important, that we make that a part of our election process. And there's a requirement that the county, for any wait time problems, would have to remediate it before the next election. So those are the requirements. Next. I'm not going to go through the specific language, so go ahead and go to the next slide. Next slide. We covered all of this. Next slide. Okay. There are 3 viability milestones, goals, metrics that we have got to achieve before we go forward with signature collection. So you file an initiative, you get title and summary. After you get title and summary, you get 180 days to collect 1 million signatures to qualify the initiative. In order to get 1 million signatures, you really need like 1.2 million signatures because some may not be valid. And you know what? I can guarantee you that the are people not seeing the slides? I just got a comment that popped up saying people are not seeing the slides. I'm hoping people are seeing the slides because we have a nice little slideshow that we've prepared for everybody. Okay. People say they can see it. Thank you. Some people are technologically challenged. I just want to make sure that everyone can see the slides. The 1 million signatures, you're given 180 days to get 1 million signatures, which is not easy. And so at Reform California, we have almost perfected the citizens' signature drives in the state of California. The folks at the recall failed a couple times, lessons learned the hard way, and we kept giving them our advice as to how we do it and how they can do a citizens signature drive. Again, I'm not knocking them; they're wonderful people. And what they did was they gave a gift to Californians of actually voting against Gavin Newsom during the pandemic. But one of the things that we know is that without a lot of money, and our citizens initiatives never have a lot of money because the special interests don't want to invest in what we're trying to do, limit taxes, hold government accountable, clean up our election fraud. In order to do a citizens drive, you've got to have in place a house list of people already willing to sign. And so our first phase of every initiative, and we did this with the gas tax, which was largely a citizens initiative, is we get everyone to go online to an online petition. And I've been emailing this petition to you for the past 90 days, begging you to share it. And the online petition has information for first name, last name, street address, zip code, phone number, so we can text you, and your email. Why are we doing this? I saw some people out there, bad mouthing the effort. And they really did a disservice to the effort to try to fix California and achieve progress on election integrity. They said, don't sign because these don't count. Of course they don't count. You need a wet signature. But in order for us to do 1 million signatures in 180 days, I need to have a list of people that we can mail to. And what people did when they said don't sign is they actually thwarted the effort. So I'm not asking you to do something for fun, for show. We're doing this because you got to have a house list. So this 150,000 goal is we want 150,000 people to sign up online saying, I support voter ID. And here's my address. Why? Because we mail them right out of the gate the first week the petition with a letter that said you recently signed online to commit to signing the voter ID initiative. Enclosed is your paperwork. By the way, before you mail it back to us, can you get an extra 3 or 4 signatures? Think about it. If 150,000 people are already pre-identified as wanting to sign, they get the paperwork in the mail, and that costs us money to mail that. So we have a house list that's very targeted. We now probably are going to get 3 or 4 signatures back from each of them, which is 150,000 times 3 or 4. Now, not all 150,000 are going to see the letter in the mail, and so we probably have to mail it twice, which is why we have the email and the cell phone number we asked for, so that we can text you and email you saying we haven't received your petition back yet. See, there's a method to this. This is how the Democrats do their stuff, by the way. We didn't come up with this. We're just copying their approach to community organizing. So I cannot in good conscience say, okay, let's kick off this drive unless we can get to 150,000 people statewide who say, I want to sign. So my request to you right now is in the next 12 days, actually now we're down to 10 days because I have to make the decision on November 18th. Share the online petition. It's online at electionintegrityinitiative.com. Share that online petition, get people to sign up. All right, next metric is volunteers. I'm asking you not just to share the online petition, but if we moved into the phase of the wet signature gathering, and I mailed you a box, a kit of materials, which is different than the number 10 envelope with the petition in for someone who says, oh yeah, I'll sign and I'll get 3 or 4 signatures. If you're a volunteer, what you get from me and my campaign team, and this costs us money, is a box with a stack of empty petitions, materials, training materials, how to. We give you signage so that you can actually put a sign in front of your table if you want to go out and attract people to it. So that costs money, and we have to put it in all into a box. We have only commitments for 72,910 signatures from volunteers. So I'm asking you not only to sign up as a volunteer, but as a volunteer, stipulate to me, to the campaign, how many signatures do you reasonably think you can collect and commit to? So it starts at a range of 10. Can you get 10 signatures? Because, if you get 3 signatures, you're really not a volunteer. We appreciate what you're doing. Don't get me wrong, but you're someone who got the petition and, gave it to a couple friends and then sent it back. Thank you. We need that. Okay. That's part of the first metric. But here we're asking for true volunteers, people to say, I will get 10. I'll get 25. I'll get 50, I'll get 100. So there's different levels that you can check in on. We also ask if you're willing to take a more hands-on role with other volunteers. So we ask if you're willing to be a team leader, which means that you're going to recruit and work with 3 or 4 other volunteers, an area leader, a regional leader, because we will be all volunteer based. The people who were involved in the recall signature drive know what this is all about. They had great regional leaders and area leaders. It was a wonderful thing. So we need to know, are there enough volunteers to run a statewide volunteer program? Because our goal is to collect 250,000 to 350,000 signatures just from volunteers. So you have that first goal that gets in about 500 to 600,000 signatures. The second goal is hopefully 250 to 350,000 signatures. The final goal is to cover hard costs, and that's fundraising. Most initiatives, next slide, most initiatives require $10 million to qualify. We think we can qualify this for $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. And then we would only spend $1 million to $1.5 million, maybe $2 million on the campaign itself. Again, we're not going to have a whole lot of people, big bucks, giving money to voter ID. We're going to have to win this on a grassroots basis. And I feel confident if we qualify this initiative, it passes. I absolutely feel confident in that. The challenge is the qualification, but we need to raise $1 million in hard dollar costs to move forward with the signature drive. What does that cover? We have to print petitions in multiple types of books. We have to print the signs. We have to mail out individual petitions. Remember when I said, we want 150,000 people? We're probably going to have to mail those people twice, or at least a good number of them twice. And so that's maybe 250,000 times first-class mail. The volunteer kits are shipped, and that's going to be more expensive. And we do need to have paid signature gatherers. Now, we're not going to do a lot of paid signature gathering because we really need volunteers to do this. But we do supplement with mail and paid canvassers. And usually these are conservative high school and college kids. It's their first campaign job. This is not an extravagant budget. There's no wiggle room. Reform California raises money in its general program for its campaign to cover our campaign manager, our digital managers, and whatnot. So we're already covering those costs. We assume that we're going to be able to raise that generically from people who support and like what we do at Reform California. This is money we need to earmark directly for the voter ID initiative. If we don't reach these 3 goals by November 18th, I am not in good conscience able to ask a volunteer to even print off our initiative and go collect signatures because I'm wasting their time. I'd rather have them making phone banking calls for a good candidate in the primary, or, knowing that when I do ask you to do it, it means, hey, all systems go, we can get this qualified. So November 18th is my go, no go. If we can achieve these goals by then, and look, we've raised $1 million in 30 days before in this campaign. So I know we can do this, but I don't think enough people really understand that unless they step forward and help, it ain't happening, at least not on the schedule that we'd like to have it happen on. Next slide. So these are the two windows that we're looking at. We've already done the filing. We got title and summary. Unfortunately, the 180-day clock started on the 19th of last month. I can do an initiative in 5 months. So losing October 19th to November 18th is not too big of an issue. If we eat into more time, we're not going to get it qualified for 2024. So in order to hit 2024, we got to get those viability metric goals in by the 18th. So then I can order up the petitions and the mailing kits and the mailers and get all this out by December 1st. That would still give us 138 days to qualify. And we would also immediately email out the petition for people to print off at home. So there's a lot of stuff that will happen between November 18th and December 1st. But in order for us to pull the trigger, we need to know in November 18th, go, no go. If not, our next window, because I'm telling you right now, we're going to get this thing done, period, full stop. I want to get it done sooner rather than later because it doesn't take effect until the voters approve it, and then it applies to the next elections. So if we want this to apply in 2026, we got to get it passed in November of 2024. If you wait until November of 2026, it won't take effect until 2028. Do you understand? I want this ready for the next governor's election. So 2026, I think, is not ideal. I think 2024 is where we should be. So, but if we don't get it by November 18th, then 2026 is going to be our next window. But I'm not waiting till 2025. I believe that we would continue to build up on those metrics through March 1st and refile the initiative right after the primary, March 15th, so that we would launch the signature drive by May 15th, and we would collect signatures for that 6-month period right through the November election. And here's what I'm thinking. We are going to be fighting for the Taxpayer Protection Initiative. Nothing stops us from sliding in a 1-page voter ID petition into that mailer. We'd have to report the costs appropriately, but it would be very cost efficient for us. Plus, as we send out people with our voter guide in the November election, we can have them collecting signatures for voter ID. I think it makes a perfect match. So our next window is going to be after November 18th. If we miss it, we go right into continuing to recruit, continuing to get people to sign up online, and continuing to raise money, so that our next window is March 15th for a filing. And then we would do petitioning through the summer into the November election. So that is the timeline. It really is up to you, our supporters, whether we're going to be able to do this. I'm a volunteer chairman of Reform California. This is my blood, sweat, and tears passion. I can put together a plan, I can lay out the metrics, and I can let you know where we are. But at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us doing it. I cannot wave a magic wand and just make it happen. So it's important that we push hard with our friends and let them know that the time is of the essence. We are at a critical milestone. We cannot delay, and that they need to sign up online at electionintegrityinitiative.com. So go to the next slide, and then we'll take questions. Well, before we get there, we are, in addition to the voter ID initiative, we still are trying to do immediate work on election integrity in this upcoming election, even before voter ID takes effect. And that's why I need all of you to help next year in promoting the safe voting method, which means send, audit, fix, examine. The Transparency Foundation Secure the Vote initiative actually lays a lot of this out. They're nonprofit, nonpartisan. They don't take positions on candidates or ballot measures, but they do encourage voting and verifying your ballot. And so we need to do Safe Vote Sunday events. You should be voting in the first 72 hours of the election. Do not listen to people who say wait until election day. They do not know what they're talking about. They're actually a cancer on the conservative movement, and they need to stop trying to help Democrats win elections. I'm so upset with them. saying wait until election day. They're fools, and they're hoping that you get disenfranchised. I'm done with the people saying wait till election day. We got to get our base to vote early and then verify that their ballot was received and counted. And if it's not received and counted by a week out of the election, then they should demand a second ballot, which is called a provisional ballot. That's what the safe voting method is all about. And it's step by step. It's super simple to follow. But we're also wanting to train and deploy trusted workers to county election offices because we want these signature reviews to be done properly. They're not being done properly right now. Where we have implemented this project, we've improved the integrity of the election in those counties substantially. So that is a priority for us in 2024. Next slide. I will tell you this, I don't think we have Republicans out there willing to do the audit the vote ordinances county by county. We would like Republicans who are in county board positions to do this, but they're so afraid of their own shadow and being accused of doing wrong things. I will give a call out to people like Tony Strickland in Huntington Beach, who's doing a phenomenal job of stuff like this. But most Republican elected officials, well, they're cowards when it comes to this issue, and they don't want to actually work on it. But we do have an effort underway to look at counties and see if there are counties that are red counties in California that can implement the audit the vote ordinances, and we'll be talking about that in 2024 as well. Okay, now we're on to questions. You can sign up at electionintegrityinitiative.com to volunteer, share the page with the friends, get that online initiative shared. It's on that website. And then, of course, please chip in a contribution of whatever you can. To ask a question, hit *9 if you're on the phone. To ask a question in the Zoom app, you can click raise hand and we'll call on you, but you have to unmute yourself when we call on you. And then finally, you can type in your questions into the chat box. If we don't answer a question that you have, please email us at info@reformcalifornia.org. I'm going to answer some questions on the chat box while Dylan gets our first person on the Zoom application ready. Deborah says there's no verification of citizenship via SOS and DMV. That's correct. Our initiative would fix that. Flagging driver's licenses will not work. It will be considered an invasion of privacy. That's from Margaret. You're going to have all sorts of comments about this, that, and the other thing. You know, all I can tell you right now is that the voters support voter ID. I know you may think it's an invasion of someone's privacy to provide an ID, but I disagree, and the voters disagree. And I really don't see a better way to fix the problem than to have verification of someone's identity. People don't have a problem with showing an ID to go buy a pack of cigarettes or a case of beer, or showing an ID to get on an airplane. So I think showing an ID for voting is common sense. People see the slides. Thank you very much. New California under Paul Preston has actively been obtaining signatures for voter ID, one-day voting, and paper ballots. They initiated this effort last year. No, that's not true. There is no other voter ID initiative in California. I don't know what they're doing, but there is no other voter ID initiative in California. Okay. Dylan, do we have someone ready for Zoom?
Yes, we have Tonya Mays. You should be allowed to talk now. Tanya.
Okay, Tanya Mays, go ahead and go ahead. We can hear you.
I had two questions. One was, can you clarify again? You were talking about not waiting until the election day to vote. I was a little bit confused on what you were saying there.
Because Democrats have gutted the number of polling stations, they want to create long lines, which suppresses our vote. In order for us to turn out our base and lazy conservatives that we have to drag to the polls on election day, we need to make sure that when we show up to the polling station, there's no line.
Okay.
Our base voters are creating a line, and then they are suppressing our vote, and that's a problem. And the Democrats are laughing all the way to City Hall in Sacramento because they know we're fools. They also, I think, fund some of these other groups saying, you know, don't use mail-in ballots and don't do it until the very last day and walk in. I can think of no justification for that whatsoever. I will also tell you that your ballot, if it is somehow rejected at the polling location, you know, because they usually say, oh, you know, put your mail-in ballot in this box, you can go, and it counts like a day of vote, which is actually not true, but a lot of people fall for that. If your ballot's rejected, you have no ability to fix it. You're disenfranchised. Whereas before the election, you have the right to demand a provisional ballot. And you also have the ability to verify that your ballot was indeed counted before Election Day. There's nothing wrong, by the way, with someone who does not have verification that their ballot was counted. There's nothing wrong with them demanding a second ballot, a provisional ballot, and casting two ballots. The registrar is under the rules. They have to give you that second ballot, but they have to set it aside and wait to see if your original ballot is processed and counted. If not, then they will move on and count that provisional ballot. So we need to teach conservatives how to vote smart and to verify their ballot was received and counted. Election integrity begins with us individually verifying our own individual votes. So that's why we need you all to vote early. Now, the only other argument I've heard from conservatives as to why we shouldn't be voting early is, I want to be a voting ninja. I don't want people to know that I'm voting. Really? You do know that the Democrats can look up your record and see how many times you voted? And I suspect if you're sitting on a Zoom at noon on Wednesday, November 8th, on election integrity, you probably are a perfect voter. No one is going to be surprised that you vote. So get that ballot in and then spend election day dragging all the lazy voters into the polls. So again, this is part of our strategy to win these elections. It's a smart strategy, and we need everyone to really adopt this approach because it's what the Democrats are doing. Next question.
We have Debbie LaBoy.
Debbie LaBoy, unmute yourself. There you are. Go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Carl. I just wanted to comment on your goal number 1, the online petition signatures.
Yes.
Our election integrity team here in Sonoma County, when we were reviewing all of the goals and getting our volunteers on board with this initiative, we got a little confused about the wording. It says online petition signatures. We were thinking all of a sudden, now is this an online petition to gather signatures when we know we can't do that. We know it needs to be a wet signature, so we knew that. But I wonder if that's misleading to say online petition signatures, that people might be thinking that's the actual petition to sign for the initiative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we want people to know that it is an online petition, and a lot of people are like, well, I'll sign it when I get the wet signature. Well, that then defeats the purpose of us building up the advanced House list outside of the 180-day window. Remember, the only way that the recall qualified is that they were lucky enough to get a judge to say because of the pandemic they got an extra 80 an extra 6 months, 180 days. It would never have qualified under a 180-day cycle unless you have $10 million and can hire people to stand out in front of every darn store. We're never going to have that. So in order for citizens initiatives to succeed, particularly conservatives, we got to start before the 180-day window to identify who's willing to sign and then contact them in multi-mode to let them know that they need to get the wet signature now back. The paperwork is being sent to you. The paperwork now needs to be received, and then you ping them until they send back the paperwork. We also know from the gas tax repeal that this approach works because people are willing to get maybe 2 or 3 other signatures of people they know in the household, because the letter we send them says, please, if you have time, grab a couple extra signatures on this sheet. So it's absolutely vital that people share that petition and get it out to folks as soon as possible.
I agree. Thank you. And also, why did the California GOP at the convention not take on this initiative to vote on it?
Good question. You
Okay,
have to ask the
powers that be.
yeah, you'd have to ask the folks that seemingly continue to lose elections in the state of California why they're not helping out.
Was this tried to be, was this brought up to the initiative committee at the convention prior? I know it had to be prior. They got to prepare for it for the convention.
Yeah, no, their policy is we don't consider initiatives unless they're already qualified. And I think that that is flawed in that the party shouldn't be waiting passively for ideas to come by. The party should be lighting a fire in the street by putting ideas on the ballot and initiating this stuff. Because I can guarantee you the only stuff that you're going to get proposed are bad things, with rare exception, bad things.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Next question.
We have Cynthia Cuevas. Cynthia, you should be allowed to talk.
Cynthia Cuevas, please.
Hi.
There you are.
Yeah.
You can hear you.
Okay. So when I got the initial email about the online petitions, I forwarded it to as many people as I knew would, would likely think this was a really good idea, kind of thing. I'm into getting wet signatures. When are these petitions going to be ready for wet signatures? I'm not sure how much more I can forward to people's emails. I mean, I have a fair amount of people that I email, but I've hit most of the ones I'm pretty sure will be receptive. So for people like me that are kind of running out of the email thing.
One thing you can do is you can contact the office. We can give you business cards, but we're not going to ask you to waste your time on wet signatures until we know we have enough online signatures, enough volunteers, and enough funding to actually make it worth your time. If I start down the road of 180 days and ask people to collect signatures on wet signatures, that doesn't qualify. And that's a waste of our time. However, if we get our ducks in a row and I tell you, okay, now is the time to take the signature sheets and go get wet signatures, it's not because we have a Hail Mary pass underway. It's because we're going to do this and you're absolutely needed to do it. So can I tell you, if I had a nickel for every conservative group that said, oh, we're collecting signatures and the number of failures I've seen over the years, we would have more money than George Soros. We would be buying law and order prosecutors in California. So conservatives need to be smart about running these campaigns. We do not have the resources the other side has. And that's why when we do these initiatives and campaigns, we have to be very laser-like, very efficient. So the answer to your question is, keep getting people to sign up. Absolutely keep getting people to sign up online.
Okay. So you mentioned business cards. Now, I don't have a problem with going around my neighborhood, especially to people I know, but that I don't know my neighbors' emails except for maybe a couple of them. But if I had those business cards, could I hand those out and just say, hey, this is, so that might be a way for me to get more information out.
Yep. Put them in your purse. That would be wonderful.
Okay. All right. I will take some of those.
All right.
All right. Do I still need to call the office at some point or
email the office and ask them for the business cards and give them your address?
Business cards. Okay. All right. Will do.
That is the end of our question and answer period. I want to make sure we have a hard out at 1 o'clock. Please email us for additional questions at info@reformcalifornia.org. Go to the website electionintegrityinitiative.com, and we will be posting these slides on our website for you to share with people far and wide. Thank you so much.